Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a deeper understanding and an appreciation of the wonderful and captivating world of chess. I am your host, George Merijanian, Program Director for the Wachusett Chess Club, which meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at Fitchburg State College. And with me is my co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts. Welcome, Martin.
Hi, George. Good to see you again.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to see you, Martin, on Chess Chat. You know, Martin, with all the Chess Chat programs we have done, we have actually never discussed chess prodigies. Now, we actually have presented games of players who were chess prodigies, but do you know actually anything about chess prodigies?
Well, a prodigy in general, I guess a general definition of a prodigy is someone who at a very young age shows a remarkable talent, an adult talent in certain fields. For instance, chess would be one. Music, mathematics, and science are fields where occasionally a young person will show a remarkable talent. It tends to be fairly focused, and chess is one of those endeavors.
Well, there have been many prodigies in chess, and among the world champions, not all world champions were prodigies, but I think the most gifted among the world champions, gifted prodigy, was Jose Raul Capablanca.
Right.
And what do you know about Capablanca, Martin?
Well, I know he was a Cuban, born in Cuba, and that he dominated the chess world in the early 20th century. I understand that he learned chess watching his father play at the age of 4.
Yes, I think we actually even have a photograph of his playing his father when he was 4 years old. In fact, he learned the game by watching his father play other people, and he didn't study the game. He just instinctively picked up the game by just watching, again, his father play. So that's a classic photo of him. You know, I think that was taken like in 1892, 93. Again, and that's a phenomenal age. At age 4 to learn the game of chess. And what he did, he actually, you know, at the age of 16, he was sent to this country, the United States, for his education from Cuba. And he actually entered Columbia University. Here's a photo of him in his early 20s, probably when he was a student at Columbia University. And he stuck around at Columbia University only about a year. And he dropped out because he found studying mechanical engineering just tedious. You know, he spent most of his free time, you know, during his term at Columbia playing chess at the Manhattan Chess Club, and also going and playing in the parks. You know, Washington Square Park was very famous. So that's a great photo of Capablanca back actually probably around 1906, 1907. And again, what he did, we should point out actually that he became eventually became world champion. I mean, in 1921, he beat the great Emanuel Lasker, who was born in Germany, but actually came to the United States, settled in New York, and he beat him in Cuba. He beat him in Havana. The match was held in Havana. It was hot. You know, Lasker complained that the conditions were not right for him. The heat. He was also sick, but he lost the title to Capablanca in 1921, and Capablanca held the title until 1927, when he lost the title to Alexander Alyekhin of Russia, who had moved to France, who became a French citizen. Okay. What we have actually, we have some more footage of Capablanca's. We have some, you know, both photographs, and we have some classic videos. It's the first time we're presenting some footage of a video. Actually, he also, when he played in Moscow, he played in tournaments all over, but he loved to play in Russia. And this is actually this is a video of his playing a simultaneous exhibition in Moscow, Russia. There he is, Capablanca, smiling. Very good-looking man. He was a ladies' man, by the way. He had the reputation of being a ladies' man. And there he is playing a huge crowd of chess players in this exhibition in Moscow. This goes back. This video goes back at least 80 years, I would say.
Back in the 1920s.
Right, exactly. Now we're going to follow this up speaking of 1920s, in 1925 there was a major international chess tournament in Moscow, and Capablanca, who was a world champion then, was invited to play in this tournament. And there was a film, a Russian silent film we're going to see. It was produced by, this is done by the Polish individual. And there is Capablanca. He's standing. Now this is a story about a man who's obsessed with chess. He rushes to his fiancée, who's ready to take poison. She realizes her husband-to-be is so obsessed by chess that she wants to kill herself. Well, Capablanca gets out of the car. She throws him. It's a king. You see it's a king, but it's poison inside that king. She was ready to take poison, and she turns to Capablanca. She says, "Leave me alone. Because of chess, I hate the whole world." She hates chess because her fiancé is obsessed by it. So Capablanca turns to her and says, "I understand this feeling. In meeting with a beautiful woman, I also hate chess." So he's talking to her, trying to console her. And again, she despises chess. He throws away the king, which actually contains the poison, and she turns to him and she says, "Finally, I have met an enemy of chess." And he smiles at her. He shakes the hand, and then she says to him, "Tell me, how did you save yourself from chess fever?" And that was they shake hands and they go off, and who knows, they don't live happily ever after. But this was a 1925 Russian silent film done by the great Russian director Vyacheslav Pudovkin. And this is about a 30-minute film. Actually, we just saw a fragment of it, but it's a classic film. It's,
and that was at a time when the Soviet Union was still in its early years, and they were trying to, the government was actively trying to promote chess among its citizens as a way of boosting its stature in the world.
Oh, yes. In fact, the Soviet Union used chess as propaganda, that they were superior. By showing that their chess players were the best chess players in the world, they said, "Look our chess players are the best. That means our system must be the best." So they used it, they tried to use it as propaganda, and they used it. They used it effectively as a propaganda tool. Now, Capablanca actually played in many tournaments. He loved playing at the Manhattan Chess Club. I don't know if I mentioned, for example, when he was going to school in New York. There's a picture of him. He's probably in his late 20s, early 30s at the board. You know what's interesting about Capablanca? He was lazy, a lazy chess player, which means he didn't study chess. He prided himself. He says, "I don't have to study this game." It says, I can. He loved to play it. He says, I can learn this. I can learn things just by playing. So, and many people criticize him for it. Just imagine if he had studied chess and actually studied theory, opening theory, and endgames. He was a master when it came to endgame play. If anybody wants to improve their endgame in chess, you go and get a collection of Capablanca games, and you play over the games and see how he steered that game toward the end game, and how he masterfully won in the end game. And his games are usually long. There are no short Capablanca games that I'm aware of. I mean, there might be some brevities, in the simultaneous, of which we don't have records of. Now,
well, let's go back to his childhood. What was back when he was still very young, at what point did he begin to establish his reputation as a top player? Not a champion yet, but at what point?
I would say, it was probably around the time that he was actually a student after he left Columbia. Around 1907, 1908, he was playing a lot. And he was playing in tournaments. He really didn't make his mark. I mean, he was playing in tournaments, and they knew that he was strong. They knew he was a talented player. But actually, of course, he made his claim to fame in 1921 when he beat the great Emanuel Lasker. Lasker held the title something like 25 plus years. In fact, he holds the record for holding the world championship title longer than anybody else. Emanuel Lasker did. Who, by the way, who was a friend of Einstein. In fact, Einstein used to go and visit Lasker, and Lasker would go and visit Einstein. They were good friends.
But 20 years before that, in 1901, he played the Cuban champion.
Yes.
And that was the game we wanted to look at.
Yes,
today.
We're going to look actually at a game that Capablanca played when he was 12 years old. It was in June of 1901, and he played the strongest chess player in Cuba, the national champion, Juan Corso. And this was a match. This was an informal match. This wasn't a match.
Wasn't for a title.
No title involved. But he beat the strongest player in Cuba.
Right, because Corzo was the national champion.
He was the national champ. Also, he was the champion, multi-time champion of the Havana Chess Club.
Right.
You know, it was because of Capablanca, eventually winning the world championship, that chess fever took over Cuba. And also the Latin America and South America. You know, chess is actually I think it's more popular in the Latin American and South American countries because it's all over the place. I mean, people just know chess. They've learned the game and they play it. So let's present this game that Capablanca, who was playing black against Juan Corzo in 1901 in this match in Havana. Corzo opened up actually with
E2 to E4, as we've seen before. It's a good standard opening. It occupies the center squares, which are important, and it gets a pawn out. It opens up a diagonal for the bishop and opens up a diagonal for the queen.
Okay. Capablanca now, on his first move, replies with E5. For the same reason.
Right.
He's actually trying to contest the center, but also opening up a diagonal for his dark squared bishop. Also the queen, but the queen again, queen should not come out early in the game, as we know. You know,
Right.
All right. So it's Corso's second move. What did he play here?
Well, what we've seen in the past is knight to F3, attacking the E5 pawn. But Corzo plays something different. He plays knight to C3, which at first glance isn't as aggressive because it doesn't attack anything. It is good because it develops a piece out. It attacks two of the squares on the opponent's side. It protects the king pawn. But it also has its strength in that it keeps this file open for a future F4.
I see. Now, does this actually have a name? Does this opening have a name?
Well, it's known as the Vienna game, or the Vienna opening.
Right.
Because it was popularized by Viennese players.
Right. In fact, the preeminent Viennese player who actually popularized this, there was a group of Viennese players who played this, but his name was Karl Hampe. Right. Karl Hampe, who lived in Vienna, actually analyzed this, popularized this, and you know, if you go and you find old chess books, this Vienna opening is referred to as the Hampe opening,
right.
But eventually became known as the Vienna opening because of its popularity in Vienna. Well, Capablanca's second move is coming up. Now he could bring his knight on G8 to F6 if he wanted to, which is a good move.
Sure.
But he decides to bring his knight on B8 and plays knight C6. So he's copying white.
Sure.
It's a mirror, symmetrical position. All right, so it's Corso's third move coming up. Okay. What does he play?
Well, Corso could develop his bishop to C4. We've seen similar efforts, and that's fairly common in that situation. But what he chooses is to offer a gambit. He offers a gambit to the young Capablanca to see what he's going to do here. He offers his F pawn so that he's hoping to, where his plan is to develop his pieces quickly, willing to give up the pawn, giving up that pawn for, he's going to draw Capablanca's pawn off the center if he accepts the gambit.
Okay. Well, Capablanca, he's 12 years old. He's willing to accept the challenge. If the opponent's offering him a pawn, he says, okay. In fact, that was Wilhelm Steinitz, the first official world champion, who said, if you want to refute a gambit, you have to accept it. Because if you decline the gambit, you are proving that the gambit is good.
Sure.
So Steinitz recommended that you always take the gambit. So Capablanca played E takes F4 on his third move. Okay.
Well, now that he's offered the gambit, Corzo's going to have to show what he wants to do. And what he plays is knight to F3. He needs to do this because once his pawn is captured, the F4 pawn, it opens up, the diagonal for the queen is opened up, and there's a nasty check here. So the knight has to come out to defend against the queen coming out here.
Okay. And I see that white also is threatening with his next move with D4, if this is a threat, to play D4 and have this bishop threaten to recapture the pawn. And look at the lead and development white has.
And the occupation of the center.
Right, exactly. So what Capablanca did here on his fourth move, he played, now this is rather daring. Again, not too many players would do this, but this is a playable continuation. He played G5.
Especially for a 12-year-old playing against a prominent, against the national champion. That's a fairly gutsy move.
So he plays G5, which protects this pawn, which is not under attack yet, but it also threatens to advance that pawn on the knight.
Right.
So what does Corso do now on his fifth move?
Well, Corso could again, he always has this option, but he chooses instead to play h4, directly attacking that g5 pawn.
I see. So now we have a double attack on the g pawn, the h pawn and the knight.
Right.
Okay. Well, Capablanca now decides, okay, I've got to be aggressive. You know, this whole idea. You know, normally it's not good to advance the pawns on your king side because it weakens your king side. But he says, okay, I've got some compensation here. He plays g4. So that's what he plays on his fifth move, attacks the knight, and now forces Corso to move that knight.
Right. Now what Corso has done is he's decided on a future sacrifice. He's going to play the knight to g5 with his eye on this f7 pawn.
Right. And again, the knight is anchored down by the pawn is protecting this knight, so the queen cannot certainly take that. That would make no sense at all. Okay, so it's Capablanca's turn, and that's a very annoying knight to have there. You know,
it's in your own territory. You don't really enjoy
exactly.
having it.
So what Capablanca does here on his sixth move is he attacks that knight with his h pawn. He plays h6. He says, you know, I don't want this knight here. I want that knight to. But wait a minute. Where can the knight actually retreat?
At this point, there's no going back.
No.
I mean, Corso, you know, as I said earlier, Corso has already planned that he's going to take this pawn because he cannot go here because the rook will take it.
Right.
He can't go back here because the g pawn will capture, and he can't go here because the f4, the d pawns can capture.
So the knight is trapped here.
The knight is trapped. So he has to go through it. Now that he's started off on this road, he has to finish it by taking the pawn on f7, forking the queen and the rook.
Okay, so we have what we call a fork. When you attack two pieces, two or more, you know.
Right.
So now actually Black's move, Capablanca's move is forced. He can't. He can't allow. You know, if he try to save the queen, he's going to lose his rook.
Right.
So he has to accept the sacrifice.
Right.
So King takes f7 is what he plays on his seventh move, and it's now Corso's move. Right. What does he play here?
Well, Corso, keeping in mind that he's given up all his material so that he can attack, he moves his d4, d2 pawn to d4.
Yes.
Which occupies the center, but also opens up an attack on the f pawn. Opens up, you know, continues keeping this diagonal open.
Okay. That's
hoping that he can capitalize on Black's king being kind of out of.
And I also see, besides after playing d4 with the bishop attacking, threatening to get back this pawn, this queen is also threatening to recapture there. You know, he can actually, if he can get back, you know, like 3 pawns.
Well, the king is vulnerable. If you look at queen to g4, the bishop to f4, and this bishop to c4, the king is out there all by itself.
Okay. So, with this pawn under attack by the queen, this pawn under attack by the bishop, what Capablanca does here on his 8th move is play d5, which now this bishop now protects this pawn on g4.
And however, it strikes back at the center.
It does. It actually attacks this pawn. But now what does Corso do here after d5?
Well, Corso decides to take the d pawn.
Aha. Now this is attacking the knight.
Attacking the knight.
Ooh, this doesn't look too good for Capablanca. But he comes up with this move. This is a very interesting move. Instead of moving the knight, he could retreat the knight. He could come back to b8, or he could go back to e7, or he could even go up to b4, a4. Okay. Yeah. Instead, he plays queen e7 check on his 9th move.
And in a way, this turns the table. This move by Capablanca really turns the tables at this point on Corso, because now he really doesn't have much else that he can do except to go to f2. He could try to block it with his bishop, but then Capablanca would have the push here, winning the bishop eventually.
Okay.
He could force the trade of queens, but
that wouldn't be good, because after the trade of queens, he takes off, and then after the recapture, he's going to lose this pawn here.
And the attack is going to keep going.
So, you know, remember, he sacrificed the piece. When you sacrifice a piece, you should not be eager to exchanging queens.
No.
You should be holding on to your queen.
Right.
All right.
So he really has no choice but to go to f2.
Right. And let's point out, for example, why a beginner, a ranked beginner, if a ranked beginner played that, why that would be a horrendous move.
Well, it loses instantly to queen to e3, checkmate.
Checkmate. All right, so that's something a beginner, a really very inexperienced player would do. An experienced player would never do that. So,
and of course, that move's now not an option because the bishop is covering.
Okay, so Corso plays king f2, and now Capablanca continues with g3 check. He attacks.
Right, and now he has no place that he can go except back here. Coming up here would be disastrous because he can get, simply pushing this pawn, now he's threatening to bring up the bishop.
He's threatening here to check and win the queen. Oh, this is not good. So he can't come up to f3.
The queen is here, sorry.
Right, the queen is on e7. Okay, so he has to
come back.
He goes back to g1.
And this is a miserable situation for white. His rook is locked in the corner. His king is really blocked, and he's not going anywhere. So he's in pretty dangerous shape already.
Okay. Now here comes this is probably one of the best moves in the game. You see how this knight is attacked by the d pawn, the pawn on d5. Now this knight actually could again retreat, could go to d8, b8, a4, b4. But look what Capablanca does here. 12 years old. This is the mind of a gifted, talented genius. He plays knight takes d4.
Right.
What's all this about?
Well, I have to admit, when I first played through this game, I hadn't seen it before.
Yes.
And I sat and I looked for a long time wondering just what it was about that move. Why would he do that up all the other moves on the board? And then I realized that there are some serious threats that come out of this.
So Corso accepts the sacrifice. Queen takes d4. And what the whole idea that Capablanca had here was to play Queen c5.
Right.
All right. Now, what is he threatening?
Well, he's threatening checkmate. If at this point Corso was to simply take the queen,
yes,
then it's checkmate after bishop takes
bishop takes c5 check.
And
he could delay. He could delay it by
block
blocking
it temporarily,
but then the bishop would capture on e3 and be checkmate. So
that's the threat
behind. This queen is poison.
Right.
This black queen cannot be taken. But again, he's threatened to take this queen with a mate threat. So what does Corso do now on his 13th move? Well, does he have to protect? Doesn't he have to protect this move here?
Right. He comes back. He can't take the queen. He has to come back, and he has to protect the queen with knight to d2.
All right. Now he's protecting that nicely. Now Capablanca falls up with another great move. I mean, this is really great when you think a 12-year-old can play like this. He plays queen b6 on his 14th move. Now, what is he threatening here? He's retreating? He realizes by taking he doesn't gain anything. But what is he threatening now?
Well, now he's threatening to pin the queen. Use the bishop to pin the queen.
Oh, bring the bishop to c5. Ooh, goodbye queen.
Right.
He wins the queen.
And he can't move the queen off this diagonal because it's pinned by Capablanca's queen.
All righty. So what is Corso going to do here on his 14th move here?
Corso has no choice but to take the queen.
All right, so he captures. Queen takes b6.
Right. Captures.
All right, so now Capablanca has a choice here, recapturing. Which way is the best way to take?
In general, one would say you capture towards the center.
Yes.
That's a general, unless you've got some compelling reason not to. But in general,
it's always good to
capture towards the center.
Toward the center.
And in this case, especially because the rook is still on that file and it opens up this file, whereas there's nothing on this file. So it
puts pressure on this pawn. This has to
and gives the rook. We'll see.
All right. So now it's Corso's move coming up, and it's his 14th move.
Well, and the threat again is this bishop. That checkmating threat is still there.
Yes.
Because it's bishop to c5 checkmate. So he has to find a way to block it, and so he plays knight to d4.
Okay. So he's going there. All right. So what Capablanca does here after knight d4, he pins it. He plays bishop c5, and now he's threatening to take the knight with mate to follow.
Right.
All right. So what does that force Corso to do here?
He defends it with c3, pawn to c3.
All right. All right, so Capablanca now has to do something. Now, can he put more pressure on the knight? He's attacking with the bishop, but again, the pawn on c3 is protecting it. So what Capablanca did here, he played rook a4.
There's the value of the open file and capturing in. Now he's able to bring that rook into play.
And now we have a double attack on the knight, which is only protected once. And he's threatening, by the way, to
he's threatening checkmate again.
It's threatening to take threatening checkmate by taking this knight with the rook, not with the bishop. Okay, So, all right. So anyway, so what happened here now? So what does...
He can't defend. Corso can't defend in any good way. He can't put the bishop here because he loses it. So he has to give his king some running room.
Right.
Plays bishop to e2.
Okay. So all right. So now he realizes he's giving him some space. So he plays bishop takes d4 check.
He's going to take...
That's four. That's force.
That's force.
C takes d4. So now Capablanca says, okay, I'll take rook takes d4.
Right.
I've got a pawn there.
He's got the pawn back.
All right.
Now he's got to find some. He can't put his bishop here, and he can't put his bishop here. So he's got to find some place to do it. So to free up a diagonal for the bishop, he plays b3.
And I see that he's also threatening to play the bishop here, skewering
the two rooks.
All right. So what does Capablanca do after b3? Well, he actually gets this knight out which actually blocks this skewer possibility.
It threatens a pawn. It brings the knight out into play.
All right, so what does Corso do here?
He's going to threaten the rook. Even though it's not a skewer, he at least opens up some space back here.
Okay, now, this is what Capablanca comes down with. Rook d2. Rook d2, we now have a double attack on the two bishops. Right. So what does Capablanca do?
Well,
or I should say Corso.
Corso plays bishop to h5, check.
Aha. So he's okay. So now Capablanca could move the king, but the Corso would be able to save this bishop by moving it. But what Capablanca does is play knight takes h5.
Right.
Knight takes h5 on the 21st move.
Corso goes ahead and takes the rook on h8.
And that's called winning the exchange.
When you
take a minor piece like a bishop or knight and win a rook, that's called winning the exchange. And now what Capablanca did after bishop takes h8 is play f3.
Right.
Look at this strong move.
So these pawns are bearing down.
Yep.
Corso says, well, he has to give himself more space. He has to try to free himself. So he plays g take f.
Okay. So how does Capablanca continue to attack? Well, he actually improves the position of his knight by playing knight f4.
He's going to increase the pressure.
He does.
And Corso takes the opportunity to bring his knight, hopefully, again, looking for ways to try to ease some of the pressure.
So now he comes back to bishop e5.
Hoping to make an exchange
of some sort. Trying to get rid of this knight.
Or the pawn if he can.
Or the pawn, right, if he can do that. All right, so Capablanca now, it's his move. Right. Well, now he has the opportunity to check that king with rook g2 check.
King only has one square to go, that's f1. He can't go up here and he can't go over here, so he can only go to f1.
All right. Ooh, it looks like he's trying to escape.
It looks like he might get away.
Well, what actually Capablanca does now is play rook f2 check.
And now in this case, he can't go back to g1.
Why not?
Because he's facing knight to e7, checkmate.
Or e2, right.
e2,
knight e2, it's checkmate, right. So he can't retreat.
So he can't go back, so he can only go this way.
So he's forced to go that way. All right, so now, after this next move, I think actually Corso resigned, and the move that Capablanca played here was knight d3 check.
And at this point, Corso resigned.
Now, why would he resign?
Only has this space to go to, and the follow-up move is a crusher, g7.
Attacking the rook. He's threatening both. The pawn is also attacking the rook. This knight is threatening to win this. Corso says, I've had enough. He called it quits and said, I give up. So this was quite a game for a 12-year-old kid, in this match here. I don't know if we have any more photos of Capablanca. Again, we saw some of the early photos when he's 4 and 5 when he learned chess from his father, and again, he was he had to be the most talented world champion, natural talent. Here is a picture of him this is later in life. He's probably because he died very young. He died in 1942. I think he was around like 50, not quite 50, 53 or 54.
Yeah. Ironically, only a few months after Corso, I think.
Yes, Corso died actually shortly thereafter. So Capablanca was really a phenomenon. He was actually what we call a wunderkind. And of course, if I looked up actually in Finnish, what would you call a prodigy or ihmelapsi, which is a wonder child, and that's what he was. He was made famous around the world, and again, this was a great game to go over. Well, chess fans, I hope you enjoyed the game that Martin and I presented to you. We presented a game from probably the most talented prodigy among the world champions, Jose Raul Capablanca. And next time, if you join us, we're going to have you present another interesting game, another interesting personality, and I hope you join us because we'll be here to present the game for you.